But then there's some people who we see that God asks a whole lot of. In Hosea chapter 1 and verse 2, the Lord spoke to Hosea and said, "Go take yourself a wife of harlotry, and have children of harlotry. For the land commits flagrant harlotry, forsaking the Lord." Now what? God told Hosea, go and find a wife that has already proven herself unfaithful, a wife of harlotry, a woman that doesn't seem to care who she is with. Hosea, go and take her for your wife. So that's exactly what Hosea does. In Hosea chapter 1 and verse 3, Hosea goes and finds himself a woman, Gomer, the daughter of Diablam, and she conceived and born him a son. Gomer's not a name you hear too often anymore. Maybe there's other reason for that. But he finds a wife that is never faithful to him, a wife that bears him a children, but as we see later on in chapter 2, verse 4, Hosea is not even sure that they're his kids because she has been so unfaithful. It's interesting because he names these kids rather unusual names as well. The verse he names Jezreel. The text tells us in chapter 1 and verses 4 through 5, it's reference to Jezreel when he will punish the house of Jehu for the bloodshed of Jezreel, and I will put an end to the kingdom of the house of Israel. On that day I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel. The reference here is to 2 Kings chapter 9 and 10. Jezreel was the man that was selected to punish the house of Ahab. Ahab in his wickedness had been told that his descendants would be wiped out. And Jezreel was the man to do that. But Jezreel took his job a little too serious. And the bloodshed that he committed went above and beyond what God was expecting. You may remember the famous story of how he dealt with Jezebel, Ahab's wife. He went up to the tower that she was in, mocking him, and he threw her down to the ground and did nothing to dispose of her corpse until finally, when he came out, the dogs had already eaten her up. But the violence that he pushed against them said that God was going to eventually punish. And this is a reference to that, the first child, Jezreel. But then he has another child. And this one he names Lo Romani. The name Lo Romani means I will not have compassion. In Hosea chapter 1 verse 6, it says, her name shall be Lo Romani, for I will no longer have compassion on the house of Israel, that I would ever forgive them. The second child has an even more unusual name, Lo meaning not, compassion. I won't have any compassion on my people. The third child is named Lo Amane. In Hosea chapter 1 verse 9, the name is given to us, you shall name him Lo Amane, for you are not my people, and I am not your God. Hosea's three children are named after one of the more tragic events in history, and two phrases that basically say God's not going to have compassion, and they were no longer God's people. The names reflect not only his role as a prophet, but his own relationship with his wife. Hosea finally gets fed up with his wife and her unfaithfulness. In Hosea chapter 2 and verse 2, he sends the children to her and says, plead with your mother, plead, for she's not my wife, and I am not her husband. For she is put away her whoring from her face, and adultery from between her breasts. He tells us, the children, go find your mother and try to talk some sense into her. She's gone off to be with anyone else. But then finally in chapter 3, God asks even more of Hosea. He says in verse 1, go again and love a woman who is loved by her husband, yet an adulteress, even as the Lord loves the sons of Israel, even though they turn from other gods and love raisin cakes. So Hosea says, I went and bought her for myself for 15 shekels of silver and a homer and a half of barley. And I said to her, you shall stay with me for many days. You shall not play the harlot, nor shall you have a man. So I will be towards you. You see, Hosea had to go and buy her back because she had literally, because of her proclivities, gotten herself in so much trouble that she had to sell herself as a slave. And now his wife and the mother of his children, because she has gone so far, she's now a slave. So he has to buy her back and bring her home and beg her once again, please, please stay faithful. Even after all you've done to me, I will still be with you if you wouldn't continue in the path that you've gone. It's a strange situation. Chapter 2 is Hosea's rant about how terrible it is towards him. But yet, even then, you see that there is a connection. A connection between what is going on in the life of the prophet Hosea and what is going on with God and his people. Why does God want to connect this terrible situation to his people? Well, it's a metaphor. Every chapter in the book of Hosea deals with prostitution, adultery, harlotry. Those phrases pop up over and over again. Why? Because that's exactly what his wife has done to him. She sold herself to other men. She's gone off and played the harlot. She's abandoned her family because she's so interested in seeking her pleasure. God is making a metaphor here. But God uses this metaphor in other places in the Bible, but never is it more real than with Hosea. Because Hosea allows us to feel what God is feeling. It's one thing to say it, but it's another thing to see it, to live it. And that's exactly what Hosea is doing. He is living out what God is going through. Because he is comparing this unfaithfulness to what is happening to God and his people. Hosea 9:1 says, "Do not rejoice, O Israel, with exultation of the nations, for you have played the harlot, forsaking your God. You have loved a harlot's earnings on every threshing floor." You see, what Israel has done to God is exactly what Gomer did to Hosea. She sold herself out to anyone else. She abandoned the one that loved her, that cared for her, that had provided for her. She'd done it to her own detriment, and even after all she's done, he came back to her and bought her back. You see, that's God and his relationship. The story of Hosea is telling us that Israel has been unfaithful. And very graphically, it describes God's relationship to the nation of Israel. This is the northern half of the kingdom. This is the kingdom that separated after the time of Solomon. The kingdom that never had a good king. The kingdom that does nothing but drive the train straight to its own destruction. A people that have abandoned their God and served all the other gods. And as God sends a prophet to them to beg them to see what they are doing, he does so in the most graphic and visual way possible. Hosea chapter 4, verses 1 and 2. "Listen to the word of the Lord, O sons of Israel. For the Lord has a case against the inhabitants of the land, because there's no faithfulness or kindness or knowledge of God in the land. There's swearing and deception and murder and stealing and adultery. They implore violence so that bloodshed follows bloodshed." The prophet looks and says, you've been unfaithful. You've abandoned God and his principles of kindness. You've forgotten him. You don't learn about him. You don't care about him. And because of that, all these terrible things are happening in your land. Because of this, bloodshed follows bloodshed. He would later say in Hosea chapter 4 and verse 6, "My people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. Because you have rejected knowledge, I will also reject you from being my priest. Since you have forgotten the law of your God, I will also forget your children." My people are destroyed by a lack of knowledge. It's not that God hasn't revealed himself. It's not that God hasn't spoken to them. It's that they have quit listening. Like a bad relationship that's one-sided, where one person is putting in the effort, one person is putting in the work, and the other person is completely ignoring everything. My people are destroyed by a lack of knowledge. They're not interested in what God has to say. They're only interested in seeking after what they want. Later in verse 10, he says, they will eat, but they will not have enough. They will play the harlot, but they will not increase, because they have stopped giving heed to the Lord. He said, you're going to chase after all these things thinking that it's going to give you a better life. And you're going to chase after all these things and it's never going to satisfy. You'll eat, but it's never enough. You'll play the harlot, but you won't increase. You'll sell yourself out, but you won't get anything from it. Why? Because you've stopped listening to the Lord. When people quit following and listening to the Lord, they do nothing but bring their own misery upon themselves. So how had Israel cheated on God? How had they been unfaithful to God? We see the metaphor, but how does that relate to the people? Well, simply put, they mixed their relationship. They mixed their religion. You see, for those northern tribes, it was easy for them to fall into the worship of other gods. But they didn't completely abandon God. No, they just tried to blend it all together. They didn't stay pure to God. They just did what everyone else did. In Hosea chapter 7, verse 8, he says, Ephraim mixes himself with the nations. Ephraim has become a cake not turned. A very interesting metaphor. Imagine, if you would, you're cooking pancakes, right? And you have them on the griddle and you lay them down on the griddle and you just sit there and you watch them. And pretty soon that bottom of that pancake starts to burn, right? Because it's setting on that surface. But the top half of that pancake is still doughy. And you just sit there and you never flip it over, right? You never just let it cook, and then you take it off and you try to serve it to someone. Would anyone want to eat that? No, because it would be unusable, right? Because half of it would be burnt to a crisp. The other half would just be raw dough. That's the metaphor. That's the visual he says that their people are. They're not balanced. They try to mix their religion. Worthless, terrible to eat. The worshipers of God, they were worshipers of God in profession, but adopting all the idolatries of the surrounding nations. They still in their minds thought they served God. They still gave claim to be the followers, the people of God. Yet they began to look more like all the worshipers around them. They mixed their religion. They adopted the practices of the world around them. They were very religious, but they were not very pleasing to God. Hosea speaks of this in Hosea chapter 8, verses 1 through 5. He says, because they have transgressed my covenant and rebelled against my law, they cry out to me, my God, we of Israel know you. But Israel has rejected the good. The enemy will pursue them. They've set up kings, but not by me. They have appointed princesses, but I do not know it. With their silver and gold they have made idols for themselves, that they might be cut off. He has rejected your calf, O Samaria, saying, my anger burns against them. How long will they be incapable of innocence? They can pretend like they don't know any better, but it really doesn't fly. They can say, well, we didn't know. Yet it's very clear that they're just doing what they want to do. You know, and notices here he says, he has rejected your calf, O Samaria. This was the very first error of the northern kingdom. You see, when the kingdom split, because God had foretold it to be so, Rehoboam in the south, the son of Solomon, kept that kingdom, but Jeroboam, one of his servants, took the other kingdom. But he was worried. He was worried that if his people continued to worship in Jerusalem, that eventually they'd be drawn back together as one people. So he came up with a plan. In 1 Kings chapter 12 and verses 27 through 28, he says, if these people go up to offer sacrifices in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, then the heart of these people will return to their Lord, even to Rehoboam, the king of Judah, and they will kill me and return to Rehoboam, king of Judah. So the king consulted and made 2 golden calves, and he said to them, it's too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Behold your gods of Israel that I have brought from the land of Egypt. He was so worried about losing his power. He was so worried about being in charge that he began to forget about the principles of God. And so he told the people, I'm just trying to make your life better. Don't go all the way to Jerusalem. That's too much effort. Let me set up a golden calf in the northern part of the kingdom and the southern half of the kingdom. That way it's convenient for you. You don't have to go anywhere too far to worship. These calves represent the God that brought you out of Egypt. You're still worshiping God, but they weren't. They were worshiping themselves. As Hosea 8:11 says, so Ephraim has multiplied altars for sin, and they have become altars of sinning for him. He's multiplied the altars of sin. Is there any modern parallel to us today? See the sign as we come in to the community that says, go to the church of your choice. We've got plenty of them. They're all around. Just pick one and go to it. Whatever you desire, whatever you like, that's fine. You're still worshiping God. But is there knowledge of God? Is there seeking his law? Is there truly following his commandments? Or is it just really doing what we feel like and then claiming we follow God? Hosea said in Hosea chapter 8 verse 7, they have sowed the wind and they reap the whirlwind. Sow the wind, you reap the whirlwind. You get what you sow. And basically, because they had taken their religion and forgotten God and made it after their own desires and wants, their own control and power, they'd really abandoned their God. Hosea is a prophet that shows Israel for what it really is. It's the unfaithful spouse, the ungrateful bride who abandons her loving husband and chases after everything that's wrong and impure. But in Hosea, there is still hope. Much as we saw in that third chapter, right? Back chapter 2, when he's fed up with her, he goes and buys her back. It's interesting because in chapter 2 and verse 1, when before he gives that speech to his kids where he says, I'm fed up with your mother, he calls them and he says, go to them. But he gives them their name, but he doesn't call them their full name. He doesn't say Lo Ameni. He doesn't say Lo Rehoboam. He just says Rehoboam and Lo Amy. Which when you take that Lo off, it takes the not off. So it goes from being, you're not my people, and you're not going to be forgiven, to forgiven, my people. Even the first kid, Jezreel. The name Jezreel means to scatter or to sow. The idea there is that in the ancient world, when you took seed, you would throw it everywhere. You would scatter it. So in one sense, he uses that. I'm going to scatter you. Right? I'm going to cast you aside. But it's also going to sow a seed. Notice what he says in chapter 2, verse 21 through 23. It will come about in that day when I will respond, declares the Lord. I will respond to the heavens and respond to the earth, and the earth will respond to the grain and the new wine and the oil, and they respond to Jezreel. I will sow for her myself in the land, and I will also have compassion on her who have not obtained compassion. And I will say to those who were not my people, you are my people, and they will say, you are my God. Even though he looked at him and said, you're not my people. I'm not going to have compassion on you. I'm going to curse what you've done. Yet at the same time, he says, I'm going to plant that seed so I can show compassion, so I can make you one of mine again. Even after all they've done, they're still his wife. Even after all their failures, he still loves them. And that's the hope that Hosea gives us. The hope that God looks to his people, that they are still his bride, but they must remain faithful. In Hosea chapter 14 and verses 1 and 2, he says, "Return, O Israel, to the Lord your God. For you have stumbled because of your iniquity. Take the words with you and return to the Lord. Say to him, take away all iniquity and receive us graciously, that we may present the fruit of our lips." Turn back to God. Listen to his word. Isn't that the amazing thing about God? Even after all we've done to him, even after we've treated him so poorly, as poorly as Gomer treated Hosea, even after all that hurt and all that misery and all that pain, he still loves us and still will let us come home if we'll just listen to him, if we'll just heed his word. As we said, the metaphor of Hosea is so powerful because it's so real. But it's hard for us to see who we are in it. We are the unfaithful. We're the philandering. We're the one that went astray. But God still wants us to come home, but it still requires for us the same thing. Be faithful. God will give us that chance. God will give us a place. But he doesn't want us to stay where we are. Hosea is not inviting her to come home and say, well, just do whatever you want. I just want you here. So desperate for her that he's willing to give up his self, his pride. No. He has that love and compassion. But he needs her to understand she has to be faithful. And today, as we look at ourselves, the church, as the bride of Christ, the metaphor that's used, right? We are the bride of Christ. How faithful are we to our spouse? Do we listen? Do we obey? Do we follow? Do we care about his word? Do we care about his will? Or do we just be like the people of that day, say, well, it's too hard, it's too inconvenient. Give me something easy. Give me what I want. Let me do whatever I want and be and go and do everything that I want to do. We that kind of spouse? Hosea ends by saying in Hosea chapter 4, verse 9, whoever is wise, let him understand these things. Whoever is discerning, let him know them. For the ways of the Lord are right, and the righteous will walk in them, but transgressors will stumble in them. Hosea tells us a profound truth that seems so simple that we might miss it. The ways of the Lord are right, and the righteous will walk in them. Our relationship with God is not a relationship that we should think of as being, well, I can get away with this. But rather one that looks and say what God has for us is best. And I'm only hurting myself when I turn from him. I'm only reaping the whirlwind. I'm only bringing my own destruction. A world that chases after all the pleasures of this world finds them unsatisfactory. We eat, we're never filled. We sell ourselves out, but we gain nothing by it. But when we consider the word of the Lord, when we're not ruined by our lack of knowledge, but look to the ways of the Lord that are right and walk in them, we will find ourselves blessed, but the transgressors will stumble in them. There is a way to walk. There is a way to serve the Lord. And that's why it's vital that we seek his way. He loves us too much to abandon us, but he loves us too much to see us walk in a way that will destroy us. When Hosea sends his wife away, it's not because he hates her. It's because he knows that she's got to learn. And until she's a slave and until she's in the far country, until she's in destruction, does she realize how good she had it. Like that prodigal son who comes home when he realizes this isn't any kind of way to live. We're the same boat. We must look at God to understand that his way is best for us. And how deeply it hurts God when we are unfaithful to him. And how we must seek his will in all things. When it comes to salvation, do we say, I will do it my way, or I'll do it his way? There are many people who will tell you the way to heaven, but it's not a way that Jesus tells us. Many people will say they follow God, but it's not anything that's found in Scripture. If we truly want to be faithful to him, we have to know him. Israel said, we know you, Lord. They really didn't know anything about him. That's why we must know his will. We must hear his word. And that hearing of that word must make us change. It must make us seek him and his will and what he commands us to do. And so tonight we ask you not to do anything other than what Jesus tells you to do in order to be his child, to be faithful, to be part of his body, the bride of Christ. We must make sure that we are following the will of God in all things, and how we come to him and how we live with him. Maybe we've been the spouse that's been unfaithful. Maybe we haven't been adamant enough in that relationship that we're the ones that have let it down because we're not seeking him, we're not listening to him, we're not following him. Maybe we've never done what he tells us to do. Don't let your lack of knowledge or lack of action destroy you. Give yourself to God. It's the best relationship you'll ever have. He loves you, he cares for you, and he wants you to come home. Tonight, if you're subject to the invitation, tonight if you need to put on Christ in baptism, tonight if you need the prayers of your brothers and sisters, we offer you a chance to let that need be known right now while we sing this song of invitation.